Twilight Masquerade is almost legal now, meaning we've had these cards for a while. Obviously, there's been pre-releases. We've been proxying stuff. You guys probably have as well. 3 weeks ago, I did a early prediction tier list of how I thought the meta was going to shape up. Now we've had a ton of time to playtest on live. Now we've had a ton of time to playtest in person, most importantly, because live can be a little tricky. The in-person stuff has really given me a clear idea on this meta game. There's a few changes I want to make, so we're going to take a look at a tier list. Most importantly, though, we're going to take a look at a list with each deck, so you guys have some idea what to play. If you want to play one of these decks, I'm going to give you an example. So for some, I'm going to give you my example, so my deck lists. For others, I'm going to give you the deck lists that are winning online and other things. I will say which is which, so I'll be able to speak on mine a little more as I have more experience with those decks, as I have been focusing on the better decks in this format. This episode is, however, sponsored by VaultX. VaultX is the only company I trust protecting my cards. First off, you start with the sleeves. That's the first line of defense to protect your cards as you pull them. Organize them into their binders. I prefer the zip ones. There's some 9 sleeve 12s. There's a ton of different options, different colors, and they're even themed around the Pokemon sets as they're released. If you're a player like me, they also do deck boxes, able to transport your deck to events safely. They really do cover everything you need for the game. Card sleeves, binders, deck boxes, accessories. Like I said, for my collection and the cards I really do care about, like my Gengar collection, my trainer gallery stuff, all of the cards I love, I do only trust their zip binders. We've got, I think, like 3 of them already. They are the most robust, most professional feel folders I have used and wouldn't trust anyone else. If you want to support the channel, you can use the link below or use the code WoodyRec to get a discount on your purchase. This will also give you 10% off, so hopefully it's a help to you. Anyone that decides to use it, a massive thank you. But let's get into the video. So we should probably start then with the most popular deck in format, or the most hyped deck I should say, going into this format, Dragapult EX. There's a ton of different ways to play it. You can play it with the heavy Xatu line. I found that too slow personally, obviously using the Evos to evolve up. It just takes too long to get back into the game. Where things like Gardevoir can play single prize boards and slowly come back into it, this deck can't do that. If something's knocking out your Dragapult EX, you're falling so far behind, it's just really hard to come back, even with the sprinkle of damage onto the bench. So I didn't really like the full Xatu version. There was a Pidgeot version that just ran Neo Energy to attach early on, but sometimes that can be worked around. So as you can see here in this list, there's 3 different ways to get a Dragapult set up turn 2. Obviously, the Pidgeot grabbing the Neo Upper Energy is 1. We can also Xatu and then attach a Fire, but we've also got Mela attach a Psychic as well. So we've got a few different ways to get attacking early on, which I think is the most important thing. This is what the deck struggles with. This is what Dragapult struggles with. So as well as some consistency built in via the Xatu and Pidgeot line, Lumineon as well. Hold on a minute. This is... Sorry, only very minor change. We've added the Charizard over an extra Ultra Ball. Yeah, I think it's probably important to have a Radiant. You could have Alakazam. I honestly think either is fine, depending what the metagame is. If we see a ton of stuff like Shenpao, the Alakazam becomes slightly better because it's easier to take the knockouts, or Miraidons, stuff like that. Although saying that, even Charizard is good into those matchups, so honestly, maybe just the Charizard is the way. This is my deck list though, so obviously we're aiming to Rare Candy rather than Evo, so we have only got the 2 Dracloaks. I think 2 is nice because it's such a... It's just a consistency card. It helps us get set up. It helps us work around stuff like Devos, which is always annoying for these Stage 2 decks. Like I say, we've got the Pidgeot and Xatu line in here. This potentially could be a 1-1 Bibarel, so you could potentially go heavier into the consistency line, but then again, it doesn't really fix the problem. And the problem is getting energy on Dragapult or setting it up in a single turn. We've got Lumineon here. We do have 3 Ultra Ball, 2 Nest. Potentially could go 1 Nest, 4 Ultra Balls. Just so we've got more ways to search out Lumineon, Pidgeot, Dragapult. It's just tough because this deck doesn't want to discard a lot of things. Lumineon has been slightly better in testing. Just lets you find that support a card when you need it, like the Mela. Or the boss to finish off games. Most of the time you're grabbing like an Arven or Iono to set up though. We do run the 1 Collapse so we can get it out of play. Other than that, fairly standard line of supporters. Like I said, the 1 on Mela is really nice. The 4 Rare Candy, obviously needing it for Dragapult and the Pidgeot. Just a ton of consistency ball search. We do run the 1 Heavy Ball. Obviously 1 Natu. We got Lumineon, Radzard, Manaphy. 2 Pidgeot can be a little annoying at times, or even just not missing like a Dreepy. It's nice to have that extra reach and find those Pokemon. We got the one of Super Rod just to get some energy back and potentially Pokemon should you need it. We have got one switch card, hopefully helps into our control matchup. Obviously, it'd be a much nicer deck if we could fit in some other stuff, maybe like another switch or like a scoop up instead of the Neo, but we do really need that. So this is what we're trying. We do also have a rescue board just for some pivot. Obviously, it's nice. Xatu needs to attach to the bench, so just having that pivot in the active is always good. Really nice combo that I have found is setting up the Radzard earlier. So you can attach a fire and then you can Xatu a psychic down. So you can catch them off guard with an early attack, which is pretty cool. Other than that though, speaking more on these last few cards, we've got the Enhanced Hammer. Remove those missed energy so you can sprinkle onto the bench. Counter Catch is always a good one to gust up some stuff, because you want to attack into the right stuff as you spread damage. Forest Seal Stone, Defiance Band, and Devo are my other tools. Forest Seal Stone no-brainer with Lumineon in the deck. We've got the heavy ball to find Lumineon, so definitely worth playing one. Defiance Band lets you hit 230 into stuff like Iron Hands, which if you can't finish them off in one turn, you really do struggle. So that's why that's in there, just help some of the math. The Devo is essential, I would say. It's been one of the few ways you beat Charizard. You can set up their board for an entire board wipe, and that's how most games have gone I've played into Charizard or been on the other side of. So I think, yeah, Devo is a must in this. And then we've got the 3 energy, fire, 3 psychic, and the 1 Neo upper. Now, where do I think this places though? That is the $1 million question. Originally, I had it in its own tier with control. After more playing, even with this version, I think if you're not playing this version, honestly, it's like a tier 2 deck. This version might put it up to a tier 1. I think we should use tier S. A lot of people have just been ignoring tier S because they don't think any decks are good enough, but it doesn't really make sense. Like, the best decks should go up here. They are the top tier decks. Do I think Dragapult belongs there? It's a tough one. I do think it's probably tier S with some other stuff, but I don't think it's there alone, and I don't even think it's top of tier S. It could honestly go top of tier 1. It has been massively overhyped. It's definitely going to be strong. Don't get me wrong. It does 200, sprinkles 6. Very nice attack. But I don't even know if it's the best way to use Dragapult, which is kind of strange, but we will get onto that shortly. The next deck we've got here is Blissey. Again, this isn't my list. I have changed mine around, so mine currently includes a 3-2 Lipard line with 4 Dark Patch. I've stripped out the Arven and gone full research. I'm trying to fly through my deck, find those cards I need. Which, if you're only playing the 1 Turbo Energize, like this is a list that's placed in some online tournaments, I would probably go down the research route. Arven gets you nothing. It gets you a Nest Ball, so it gets you a Pokemon, and then maybe your Turbo Energize. Other than that, it's not really worth playing. It's just, I think because Arven has been the go-to in Stage 2 decks where you can use stuff like Buddy Puffin, it's just what people go to now. It is not good enough in Blissey. Blissey doesn't run quick enough or work fast enough or work well enough with Arven, so I would go research, go Colress, go something else so you can just dig through your deck. Honestly, I would much rather have another Artisan in there, ditch the Arvens, and just find your Pokemon that way. I've been running that version, and it's actually been quite strong. I just think the issue with Blissey is, if Raging Bolt is going to be a deck, which it very much seems like it is going to be, if stuff like Lugia can one-shot, if stuff like Gardevoir is going to be popular, these are all decks that can just wipe you out in a shot. Which, considering your whole gimmick is to be tanky and reuse with like Sharons, it's not the best meta game for Blissey, which is unfortunate. I think the deck itself is good, but I don't think it's good enough in this format, which is, it's kind of crushing, honestly. I was very hyped for Blissey, love the Pokemon, was hoping there was a lot of cool stuff we could do with it. Don't get me wrong, I do think it's a cool deck. It's still strong enough to compete. I was hoping it was going to be like a top tier deck, but I think it's honestly like the top of tier 2, bottom of tier 1. It just doesn't have enough lines. It doesn't have the consistency. Like I said, if you play in that list we just saw, I would put it in tier 2. If you play the research and heavier speed, so like Dark Patching instead of having to Turbo Energize, potentially it could be a tier 1. So honestly, I do think this one depends on the deck list. In general, I'm going to put it at the top of tier 2, which is, it's a sad day. It really is a sad day. So a Charizard list which has been winning. I do think there's very few cards that come in. Honestly, Kieran is an absolute must include, I think. Just modifying those numbers is always something Charizard wants to do. This version had a Monkey Dory, so I have picked this one out to show off. I do think it's quite clever because not only does it heal your Pokemon, But also, most importantly, it gets that extra damage which Charizard needs, so it's a nice synergy there. Honestly, I think if I was going to play Charizard, it would be closer to the control version, but at that point, it's more a control deck, honestly. I think this is going to be the Charizard shell going into the next format. Personally, I like the Devo, the Eri, but with Kieran, Monkey Dory, stuff like that, it could be quite powerful. Obviously, it's got a few tools like Temple of Sinnoh to try and shut off... Wait, what is it trying to shut off? Its own mist? I guess it helps against Lugia, but I think Lugia is always just a losing matchup for this deck. It's an interesting one. I don't know where Charizard ends up. I think Dragapult is ever so slightly favoured. I think the other top decks, which we'll get into, like Gardevoir, Lugia, is also unfavoured into. So for that reason, I don't think we could put Charizard up here. It's got to be tier 1. It's never going to be like a tier 2 or 3 deck. I don't care what anyone says. Pidgeot makes it so it's consistent. It just plays more games of Pokemon, which is always powerful. Obviously, we've had stuff like Mew, VMAX do that. Just playing those games, those extra games of Pokemon, winning those extra games, because of its consistency, is always going to be good. Gardevoir is what I would say is probably best deck in format, honestly. I'm going to go out on a limb on this one. I'm going to rank it up here. We'll take a quick look at our list. I do think it is just... It's good into Gardevoir, good into Dragapult, sorry. Which I don't think it should be, but it is. I mean, we've played it a ton online. It just beats it. I feel like because of the amount of damage you put on yourself, it shouldn't be, but it just works. Let's take a look at a list here. This is currently what I'm playing. A few cards in here I should give thanks to Jack Snell, which we did do a video on recently, so go check that out. Just an interview with a top TCG player, one of the top names in the UK, I would say. The Picnic Basket is a card you wouldn't really expect to see. I've seen it appear in a few Japanese lists. Sort of laughed it off originally, but playing the matchup into Dragapult, this is actually such a huge card. You can heal off however they spread it, if they do 2-2-2 or 3-3. Picnic Basket is going to heal it off, but not only that, it's good into stuff like Blissey. Healing there, 30 damage off so they can't monkey you. I've just had people scoop at that. Like, it's such a funny card, but it is actually so good in this deck. Just being able to one-shot stuff with single prizes has always been the appeal of Gardevoir, and it's no different in this deck. This is my deck list, or our deck list, I should say. Anything I am showing off here, if I say it's mine, it's something I've built with Jack. So yeah, like I say, massive shout out to him as well. This is what we've been playing. You can make a few changes. Like, I think the Drifloon could potentially be a heavy ball. We are on 1 currently, but you run so many one-off Pokemon. Klefki could be a second Fluttermane, and likewise, Fluttermane could be a second Klefki. There's just so many great attackers, so many great abilities, so many usable Pokemon in this. The Cresselia comes back in. That is the other MVP against Dragapult, which is why I think it makes this deck so favored into it. I say so favored, it's favored. Not like a 70-30 or anything like that, but I think this deck has a good chance into most stuff. It's very skill expressive, so if you're a top player, you should be winning with this deck. There's a ton of stuff you can do. It's very similar to something like Giratina V-Star with like Sableye and other stuff. You have so many different attackers, so many lines you can take. The Hero's Cape in here still over the Unfair Stamp, it just helps so much. Like, especially in the mirror, there's a few matchups where if you cape your Big Guardy EX, they just can't get through it in a swing or even 2 sometimes. And that can win you games. I think this is going to be my deck going into this format, honestly. I do think it is maybe the most powerful. There's a few other decks on here that might contend, but I think this is going to be my number 1. So that has to go in tier S at the top. Dialga, the next one. I've only picked out deck lists of ones that are like tier 1, tier S. I think you can probably find deck lists of these other ones. I'm going to put Dialga in tier 3, maybe 2. Let's put it with Blissey. I think that's fine. I think, unfortunately, Diplin... If Diplin came out last format when Charizard was the guy, then I think it probably is one of the best decks. Obviously, able to just knock out a Charizard's pretty good. But I think it's missed that point now. Charizard not quite the deck it was. Iron Thorns, I think, is down here as well. It's only really doing well if... Well, I guess it turns off abilities anyway, but it's mainly good into Lugia. I'm going to put it here. There's a few different ways you can play it. You can play it with Miraidon, you can play it with future stuff. So Iron Thorns in general, I don't really like the quad version, but we have seen it be quite nasty with Crushing Hammers and other stuff and just ways to disrupt. So potentially it could be there. Greninja has been very disappointing. I'm going to put it in tier 3. Let's take a look at Snorlax then. Again, this is a winning deck list I found in an online tournament. I haven't been playtesting Snorlax. I tend to try and enjoy the game when I play it, so I don't want to be playing this because I actually want to play the game. I don't want to just sit there with lazy old Snorlax in the active. Very powerful deck though. Like, people playing this because it is so good. It's great into Dragapult, it's great into Gardevoir, it's great into Charizard. Its rough matchup is Lugia, and I feel like Lugia might be quite popular this format. So for that reason, I can't put Snorlax in S. But with the addition of Flute, it can be so powerful. It really has got some good cards to make it the deck in this format. I think Control in general is looking pretty good. I'm going to put Snorlax maybe tier 1. I'm going to try and order these, so I'm going to put it at the top of tier 1 for now. Control, we'll get onto Control though, because it is enough of a different deck that we do need to speak about it. Next up, Lugia though. So this is my Lugia list. I'm sort of back and forth on a few things. I think Double Fish is essential. Need a ton of discards, so I like the 3 Research, the 2 Serena. I would love another Iono. I'd love more Great Balls. But just trying to focus on stuff that we need. We've got a ton of Search. We just need ways to discard those cards when we get them. Obviously, Legacy Energy means stuff like the Ogerpon, the Iron Hands, and even the Fish can attack in this list. I will say Sob is maybe the most underrated thing out of this format. It can just lock people out of games. You could potentially trap stuff for like 5, 6, 7 turns and just set up. So even if you don't get the start you want, you can just Sob for a few turns, cry in the active until things work for you. I do think Lugia is in a really strong place. It seems as consistent, if not more consistent. Obviously, we've got a few more search cards in here with Mesagoza, but it also has a massive boost in, not damage, massive boost in power level, which is the most important part. The Legacy Energy really does take this to silly levels. Something like Iron Hands taking 2 prizes, but then only worth 1 with Legacy attached. This deck is making people tech Sinnohs, tech Enhanced Hammers, which at that point, you know it's in a good spot. I think Lugia is going to be one of the more powerful decks in this format, meaning stuff like Miraidon and stuff like Iron Thorns, other things that can hit weakness into Lugia are going to be there or thereabouts. I'm going to put Lugia there. I think the Gardevoir Lugia matchup is very close. It's going to come down to if Lugia can get the hands down early. If it gets set up, then it might win. If not, I think the Gardevoir is going to take it, but it's a very close matchup. Let's take a look at Giratina then. This, again, is another list I've seen winning on online tournaments. Not too dissimilar. You do get the Ursaluna in there for that big swing late game. Potentially would like an extra Giratina V in here. Another Buddy Buddy would be nice. I think Maximum Belt becomes essential with stuff like Dragapult. With that same health as Charizard, it just wins into those matchups. There's not really much else I can say about this. I think it's in a good spot like it was last format. Probably not as good. It has dropped the Iron Leaves. Obviously, Charizard isn't going to be 25% of the metagame anymore. It's going to be a much more diverse game, which is important. Giratina's big selling point was being strong into Charizard, so it should lose stocks, but it does gain stuff like Ursaluna. I think going to Maximum Belt is the right choice. It just deals with a lot of Pokemon in the format. Rescue Board was very nice for it as well. I do think it's going to be around tier 1. I don't really want to put it in tier 2, because it is just always a good deck. So I'm going to keep it at the bottom of tier 1. Next up, we've got Control then. I do have a list. This isn't my list. This is, again, one that's been winning online. I have been playing around with this. Mine looks very different to this at the moment, though. It's one of those lists that you just need to constantly play. Need to think about theory craft. What's going to be good into what decks are going to be best. Put in those cards that beat those decks. Surprised we don't see anything like a Gicoma or anything in here. I know the Great Tusk EX has been added because it can one-shot like the Cinccino's and stuff. Or if it's got a Defiance Band, it can reach the big... No, sorry, the bigger ones are Cinccino's. It can reach Mincino's and then with the Defiance take a knockout on those, which is an interesting inclusion. Other than that, stuff like Ursaluna come in. Ogerpon is really nice. Obviously a much tankier Pokemon to trap with other than the 90 HP of the Mawile. So like I said, Ogerpon seeing a lot more value in Control. I would like to see a Water Energy in here because you could potentially attack with it and Torrential Pump to take a game potentially. It could be really interesting. Obviously you could attach Water to Sob, follow in turn Double Turbo, and then swing into some unevolved Pokemon. In general, not too changed from the last format. It's obviously just adding a few cards. I am surprised to see no Bouffalant, because I do think that's really good into the Dragapult matchup, but obviously if Dragapult's not that popular or not that powerful, maybe you don't really need to worry. I guess you've got other stuff like Eri and Devo, although we don't see Devo anymore, not really respecting those Stage 2 Pokemon. It's an interesting list. I think it's going to be a very interesting format for stuff like Control and Snorlax. So where do I think Control goes? I'm going to put it, I think Control, Snorlax, stuff like that is going to be really powerful against a lot of decks. The problem is when so many decks are good, like these top 3, these 4 here are all top decks, I would say. Control's good into half, bad into half. Obviously not great into Giratina or Lugia, but good into the other stuff normally. So it's going to make a very interesting metagame and very hard to predict, more importantly. We then got Goodra, which is a bit of a gimmick deck, honestly. Although Iron Thorns is up here, so I think Goodra is good. It's going to be good into like Dragapult. It's going to be good into Charizard, potentially even to stuff like Gardevoir and Lugia that try to go for those one shots, but can't really make it against Goodra. So I think that's one that's going to be used to surprise people at tournaments, take some easy wins, but I don't think it's going to be a top deck or anything that's sort of played in any popularity. Lost Zone box, then there's so many different ways you can play it. This one focuses on Iron Hands and Ursaluna. You can also put Roaring Moon in there, but with stuff like Mist Energy and Dragapult in the format. Obviously Dragapult, not only could it potentially gust around Roaring Moon and take a 4-prize turn, but also it makes it a little more difficult because people are teching in Mist Energy to counter Dragapult, so it ends up being worse for Roaring Moon. So yeah, I don't mind this list at all. I potentially would like to see like a Hooper, obviously good into Arceus and Blissey, but again, depends what those decks and what's popular. 2 Sableye, potentially could see a second Cramorant as well. It's Lost Box, I don't think a ton changes. You can pretty much do the same stuff you do now. Where it goes then is, see, we've been playing this and it's felt really good. We've been playing the list with like Lumineon and Rotom. We did drop the Lumineon because it doesn't seem good enough. Getting a Colress is nice, but finding it is impossible. But we do like the Rotom in there, so I don't know where this goes. I'm going to put it here, I think. Yeah, it's really impressed in testing. I've been playing it a bit, moving into this format in general, and I've had a ton of fun with it, and I think it's quite powerful. It's good into some stuff here. It's good into like Gardevoir. Obviously able to stream those Iron Hands is always good. I do think the list should include Defiance Band, which we saw in this format. It just lets your Iron Hands reach like Lugia V-Stars and even Pidgeot, which is really nice. If we see that in Dragapult, we see it in Charizard. There's just a ton of stuff to use. A ton of reasons for you to use the Defiance Band. So that's the way I would play it. Goldengo is, I think it's still a good deck. It's just not one that's really being explored. Miraidon probably has to go like here. I can't imagine it's that good because you don't have the Fluffy. You don't really have, other than the generators, any way to accelerate energy. Potentially could see some people use stickers, but I don't really know about that. Now, these next 2 lists are very interesting, so let's take a look at some deck lists first. Regidrago, one of my favorite decks to come out of this format, honestly. I've played a bit online with this, but not enough to sort of give you my deck list, so this is the online version. We do see stuff like Raging Bolt, Dragapult be the options, and this is what I was talking about. This is probably the quickest and easiest way to attack with Dragapult, which is absolutely insane. Obviously, you're using Ogerpon to draw cards, attach energy, and then using your energy switch to get it onto your Regidrago. Goodra is a nice inclusion. Noivern, I think you'd rather be using other attacks, honestly. It's a very interesting deck. The Koraidon is a very clever inclusion, honestly. I didn't even think about that one. It does give you the option to shred, although saying that, you probably just use Giratina V if you're going to do that, because it hits slightly more. There should also be a Giratina V-Star in here for sure, so that could probably replace the Noivern. In general, just a very consistent deck. Normally attack in turn 2. Obviously, you've got the V-Star from Regidrago to draw more cards, research, so you're seeing a ton of cards flying through your deck. It's been one that I found fun. It's fun to play against, fun to play. So I do think this might have some impact, honestly. Just having all of those different attackers gives it a ton of versatility, and I'm actually going to put it into tier 1. Along with the other deck to jump onto this format, Raging Bolt. It's a very quick beat stick. It's finally found its teammate in Ogerpon. I do think Raging Bolt might be slightly better. Or will it? I love Regidrago, but I don't know if I can really commit to putting any higher. They're both probably going to go around here. Raging Bolt, not really excited me, so not one I've played a ton of, but here again is a list that's winning online. It just aims to set up quickly. I've played against this. There was a period where I played over a few nights, maybe like 30 games, and honestly, 25 of them must have been against Raging Bolt. Everyone is absolutely enamored with this deck. I do think that hype is going to drop by the time people get to tournaments and really sit down and think, is this the deck I want to play? It doesn't have a ton of lines. It does one thing. Does it really well, but it does one thing. So into stuff like Gardevoir or other single price stuff like Lugia with Cinccino's, the deck just doesn't cut it. But into other stuff, it's absolutely tearing. So into like Dragapult, Charizard, Miraidon, just anything that's got big Pokemon for 2 prizes, this deck will probably beat, honestly. It's proved to be very consistent, so I do think it's earned its spot. I will say I would pick Regidrago over Raging Bolt if I was going to play one of these. If I had to play one of these for some reason, just because of the different lines you can take with Regidrago. Where Raging Bolt, like I say, is a very simple deck, very much hammer and nail. Does what it does well, but it doesn't do enough for me. But I do think it's strong enough to be in tier 1. I think you just don't play Iron Hands. If Miraidon is on here, there's no reason to... Sorry, Iron Thorn. Definitely play Iron Hands. Let's look at the last few here then. I think Future Box is still good. Obviously needing that lightning weakness if Lugia is popular is going to be good. So I'm going to put it up here in tier 2. Yeah, I do think some of these should maybe drop down though. I would say don't play this, honestly. I think that looks fine. We've got Arctina, which I think is probably in a good spot matchup wise, so that can go somewhere in here. We've got Chenpao, which has had a massive drop off. Having to play those Pokemon, the 70 HP Pokemon, the extra retreaters is never good if Dragapult is around. Stuff like Raging Bolt being quicker than it makes people sort of lean that way, I think. It's obviously still going to be a deck. It's been an absolute monster, if not one of the best decks coming to the end of this format, so potentially could be around here. Putting Regidrago above this seems insane, the impact it's had. But I do think these are strong decks. I think because they're not Pokemon people normally see, it's not Pokemon people spend time on trying to build, they're just not going to respect them. But I do think with the right time, with the right list, these are 2 very impressive decks in this format. So I'm going to stick to it. So we've got 2 more we want to rank here. I think this is probably here. Firebox is pretty good, but probably not more than that. And then finally, Roaring Moon can probably go in here. Probably at the top, honestly. Something like that. The rest of these, like I would just say, don't play. There's better versions, like there's better versions of Charizard, Meowscarada, Spathra. All of these things have proven they can't deal with Charizard, which was their big selling point. I think Spathra is actually really good into like Dragapult and other stuff as well, but these other decks up here, it's just not going to compete with. Don't play Great Tusk. Zoroark is another one I see always appear, so I'm going to put those because I think they're worth ranking. These are ones I wouldn't even have on your radar. Obviously, this one is I'm going to rank the same as the other ancient deck. I think I'm happy with that. That is what I'm going to set in for this format. Let's see in a month or 2 how I got on. But that's my list. Let me know anything you would change in the comments below. Let me know which deck you're going to be playing this format. For me personally, I think Lugia is a little hit and miss, a little too much of a coin flip for me to focus on. So I'm going to mainly be playing stuff like Gardevoir. I think some of the tier 1 stuff could honestly move up as well. I think Control is in a good spot. I think the fact fun decks like Regidrago and Raging Bolt are making an impact, which is good. Regidrago is definitely one I want to play. With the upcoming Kyurem as well, it might be one for that format. Very excited to try it. Let me know which decks you want to play down below. Let me know what you're going to be playing. Let me know any changes you would make. That's all I've got for this episode though, so I will catch you in the next one.